What happens when a CEO goes undercover to pack to-go orders and watches a teenage cook collapse from dehydration? Garrett Newton stood behind the tinted glass of his office, staring at the spreadsheet glowing on his monitor. Profits were up across most of the 20 fast food locations he had inherited 2 years ago from his father, but one store stood out. Location 17, a mid-volume branch off a highway exit, had perfect numbers. Too perfect. Customer complaints were low. Labor costs were unusually lean. Turnover was high but explained away in reports: seasonal, college kids, relocation. Garrett had never met most of the crew working there. That location had gone through 3 different managers in 2 years. The current one, a guy named Rick, had been running it for 6 months. Clean reports, no red flags. Still, something didn't sit right. Garrett decided to go in undercover. No cameras. No production team, just him. He shaved off his usual scruff, dyed his brown hair darker, wore fake wireframe glasses, and dropped $30 on a set of fake tattoos for his arms. He picked up a pair of thrifted black sneakers and a faded hoodie. He looked nothing like the guy in the corporate portrait. And since the company had grown mostly through acquisitions, most of the staff had never seen him in person. He walked in through the back entrance on a Tuesday afternoon. "Yo, you must be the new trainee from corporate," said a girl wiping down the prep table. "Rick said someone was coming. What's your name?" "Gavin," Garrett lied easily. "Corporate told me to get some hands-on experience." She nodded like she didn't care. "I'm Sienna." "I'll show you where the gloves are." The kitchen was hot, loud. Grease hissed on the fryers. A kid maybe 16, 17 was manning the grill, sweat dripping off his forehead. His name tag read Illy. He moved quickly, flipping patties, assembling sandwiches, and calling out orders. Garrett watched silently as Illy tugged at his collar, clearly overheating. Sienna handed Garrett a paper apron and tossed him a headset. "You'll be packing to-go orders today. Keep up." He got to work folding bags and stuffing them with fries and burgers. He fumbled at first, but quickly found a rhythm. Orders came and went fast. The staff didn't talk much. Every time someone asked to take a minute, even just to sip water, Rick, the manager, would bark from the office. Breaks on the clock cost money. "Hydrate before your shift." Garrett's jaw tightened the first time he heard it. He thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Illy coughed hard, wiping his arm across his forehead. He glanced toward the water cooler, then back to the grill. "Don't even think about it," Rick yelled from the side. "You step off the line, you lose your hours today." Illy's face fell. He didn't argue, just kept flipping burgers. Garrett leaned toward Sienna. "He looks bad. You guys can't take water breaks." She shrugged, eyes on her tray. "Rick says it's policy. We only get water on our actual break." "Mine's not for another hour." "That's not legal," Garrett said under his breath. Sienna just gave a tired sigh. "You're new, you'll learn." Garrett couldn't believe what he was hearing. He kept packing orders, watching Illy grow paler by the minute. The kid was shaking now. His hands trembled as he picked up a spatula. Then it happened. Illy staggered backward. His knees buckled. He collapsed hard onto the tile, the spatula clattering next to him. Sienna screamed. A couple of workers rushed to him. "Don't touch him," Rick barked, walking out of the office. "He's probably faking it, just trying to get out of work." "He needs water," Sienna shouted. Garrett dropped the bag he was holding and rushed to kneel next to Illy. The kid was barely conscious, his lips dry, face pale. "We need to call someone," Garrett said. Rick scoffed. "He'll be fine. Just let him cool off in the freezer for a few minutes." Garrett stood up slowly. His chest was tight. He looked right at Rick. "You really think that's the answer?" Rick narrowed his eyes. "You don't get to question how I run this place, trainee." Garrett straightened his apron, pulled off his glasses, and stared coldly at Rick. "Actually, I do." Rick's face went blank for a second, like his brain hadn't caught up to what he just heard. The kitchen had gone quiet except for the crackle of the fryer. Illy lay motionless on the tile, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. Sienna knelt beside him, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled off her gloves. Garrett stepped forward, wiping the sweat from his brow. "My name is Garrett Newton. I'm the owner of this company." The silence broke like glass. One of the cashiers gasped. Somebody dropped a tray in the back. Rick's mouth worked, but no sound came out. "I want someone to call for medical help," Garrett said, voice steady. "Now?" Sienna didn't hesitate. She grabbed the store phone and punched in the number. Garrett turned back to Rick. "You kept that kid on the line while he was clearly in distress. You threatened to dock his hours for drinking water." "Explain yourself." I didn't think he was that bad off," Rick stammered. "It's just this store runs tight margins. We don't have the labor to cover breaks every time someone wants to sip out of a cup." "You're not going to defend this by pretending it's about efficiency," Garrett said, his tone sharp now. "You told him to cool off in the freezer." Like he was spoiled meat. Rick shifted uneasily, glancing at the kitchen crew. No one was looking at him. Even the fry station worker had stepped away, hands on their hips, eyes locked on Garrett. "We follow policy," Rick said, voice lower now. "No, you don't," Garrett said. "You follow what you think you can get away with." The paramedics arrived less than 5 minutes later. They pushed through the back door, took one look at Ellie, and began working without a word. One of them turned to Garrett. "He's dehydrated, overheated. It's a good thing someone acted fast." "We'll take him in, check for heat exhaustion." Garrett nodded, eyes on Ellie's pale face as they lifted him gently onto the stretcher. The boy didn't open his eyes when the paramedics left. Garrett pulled off the apron and tossed it on the prep table. "Everyone take 5. Sit. Drink something." "I'll handle the line." Rick stepped forward, voice cracking. "You're not serious. We've got a rush coming." Garrett turned on him. "You've been here 6 months. You've written glowing reports, kept the numbers tight. But I walked in here today and saw a cook collapse 15 feet from you, and you called him a liar." Rick's lips parted like he was going to argue, but Garrett cut him off. "You're done. Go clear out your things. I'll send someone by to collect your keys." "You're firing me, right now?" "Yes." "Right now?" Rick didn't move at first. Then, without a word, he walked to the office and slammed the door behind him. No one said a word. Garrett turned to the crew, still standing in stunned silence. "I need one person to stay with me on the line. Everyone else, get something to drink." "Sit for 10 minutes. That's not a suggestion." The girl from the register, Alyssa, stepped forward. "I can stay. I know the system." "Good," Garrett said. "Let's go." They handled the orders together. Garrett moved quickly, not needing to fake effort this time. Burgers came down the line, fries were dumped, bags were handed out. Alyssa called out numbers calmly, efficiently. The rest of the crew sat along the back wall, sipping cups of water or soda, watching like they didn't quite believe what they were seeing. When the rush passed, Garrett wiped his hands and turned to them. "I need to know what's been happening here, not just today." At first, no one spoke. Then Sienna leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "It's been like this since Rick came." He didn't yell all the time. He wasn't one of those managers, but he'd say stuff that made you feel like you didn't have options. Like if you asked for help, you were lazy. If you needed to leave early, your hours disappeared the next week. Garrett nodded once. "What about the schedule?" Alyssa answered. "He ran it short on purpose, said we didn't need more than 3 people on the floor at once, even when we were slammed." "Did anyone report this to HR?" Garrett asked. "We tried," the fry station worker Darius said. "But he'd tell us if we went behind his back. He'd write us up for insubordination," said corporate, always backed management. A flicker of guilt ran through Garrett. He'd trusted the numbers too much, trusted the filtered reports. Never again. "Starting tomorrow, I'm assigning a temporary manager from a different location," he said. "And I'll be staying involved until we get this store back on track." "Is Rick really gone?" Sienna asked quietly. "Yes," Garrett said. "He will not be returning." A long silence followed. Then, surprisingly, Darius let out a short laugh, not mocking, but almost relieved. "About time someone gave a damn." Garrett looked at the crew. "I do, and I should have sooner." They didn't clap, didn't cheer, but they stood straighter, looked him in the eye. That was enough. Later that night, Garrett sat in the empty dining room with a laptop open and a headset on. He called the company's regional HR director. "We're going to need to audit all 20 locations." Quietly. I want to know how many other managers are working like Rick. You think it's that widespread? The director asked. I don't know, Garrett said. But I'm not waiting for another kid to get hurt to find out. He hung up and stared at the screen. A message from the hospital had come through. Illy was conscious, stable. His mom had arrived and was with him. Garrett leaned back, let out a slow breath and closed the laptop. Tomorrow he'd be back in the kitchen. But tonight he needed to write a different kind of report, one that told the truth. The next morning, Garrett was back at location 17 before sunrise. He wore a plain t-shirt and jeans, no disguise this time. The crew would be arriving soon and he wanted to be there when they did. He unlocked the front door himself, walked into the empty kitchen and flipped on the lights. The stainless steel counters gleamed under the fluorescence, spotless from last night's deep clean. The store had always looked good on paper. That was the problem. By 6:30, the first employees started trickling in. Alyssa arrived first, still in uniform, her hair pulled back tight under a visor. She stopped short when she saw Garrett behind the line. You're early, she said. So are you, Garrett replied. We've got a lot to get through. She nodded and moved toward the register without another word. Sienna arrived next, sipping from a thermos, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She didn't hesitate walking in this time. She gave Garrett a quick glance, then turned to set up the sauces. You said you were staying involved, she said. Didn't think you meant literally. I meant it. Darius came in last among the openers, still tying the apron around his waist as he walked toward the fryer. He gave Garrett a nod. You running point or just observing? I'm on dishes, prep, and backup. We're short today. Darius didn't seem surprised. We'll get through it. As the clock hit 7, the first customers began arriving. Garrett moved between stations, helping bag orders, refilling napkins, wiping surfaces. He listened more than he spoke, watching how the team adapted. Around 8, a silver sedan pulled into the lot. A woman stepped out in a navy pantsuit, clipboard in hand. Her name was Camille, a district-level training manager Garrett had called in the night before. She wasn't there to supervise the crew. She was there to observe what Rick had left behind. She walked straight to Garrett. I've gone through the records, she said quietly. Payroll was tight, too tight. He was scheduling high schoolers for split shifts without breaks, sometimes off the books. It's not just water access, it's labor violations. Keep digging, Garrett said. And talk to every employee one-on-one, privately. Camille nodded and stepped into the office to set up. Garrett returned to the line. By mid-morning, the rhythm was starting to crack. The crew was clearly trying to hold it together, but the gaps were obvious now that Rick was gone. They needed at least 2 more people to handle the weekend prep, and they didn't have them. Orders were starting to back up. Garrett called Alyssa over. How do you usually handle a rush like this? We don't, she said plainly. We just fall behind and get yelled at for it. Not today, he said. Do we have anyone reliable who's part-time and off today? She hesitated. Tomas might come in. He's solid, but he picked up a double yesterday. Call him. Offer double pay for 4 hours. She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. She pulled out her phone and stepped into the back. When she returned, she gave Garrett a thumbs up. He's on his way. It was a stopgap, not a solution, but it gave them a chance. At 11:30, Garrett stepped into the office where Camille had been quietly interviewing staff between shifts. She looked up from her notes. You need to see this, she said, sliding a sheet toward him. It was a list. Names of employees who had either quit or been dismissed during Rick's tenure. Next to each name, Camille had written a brief note based on interviews and archived exit reports. Most of them were first-generation kids, she said. Spanish-speaking, mostly. A few didn't even get final paychecks. Rick claimed no show on their last days. Garrett read through the list, his jaw tightening. Were they ever issued uniforms or logged in the system? Some were, some weren't. I think he was using cash to cover peak hours and keeping it quiet. That's wage theft. And discrimination, Camille added. Based on what I've heard, he'd only push them to line work, never front of house. Said customers responded better to certain types. Garrett didn't say anything at first, then he looked up. put together every name. We're going to contact each of them directly. If they are owed wages, they'll get them. If they want to come back, we'll offer them interviews. And I want legal to look at what we can report. We're not burying this. Camille nodded, already typing. As Garrett stepped out of the office, he saw Tomas walk in through the back, still in his delivery uniform from his other job. He looked exhausted but ready. "You good for 4 hours?" Garrett asked. Tomas nodded. "Yeah, heard what happened. Just tell me where you need me, Grill. You're covering for Lee?" Tomas paused, then said, "How's he doing?" "Stable. He'll be out for a few days." Tomas didn't ask anything else. He washed up, gloved up, and walked to the station like he'd been doing it for years. By the time the lunch rush hit, the crew was running tight but functional. Garrett moved between line and prep, backing up Tomas, keeping pace with the orders. The energy was different now. Still tense, still fast, but not afraid. Around one, a man in his late 50s walked in wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying a clipboard. He approached Garrett cautiously. "You Garrett Newton?" "I am. I'm from facilities." "Got a work order here, says your walk-in cooler's been shorting out." Garrett blinked. "We didn't submit that." The man flipped the paper. "It's from a week ago, priority marked low." Garrett called Darius over. "Have we had issues with the walk-in?" "Yeah," Darius said. "Temperature alarm's been going off randomly. Rick said to ignore it." Garrett looked at the technician. "Check everything. If it's not up to code, flag it." The man nodded and walked toward the back. Sienna passed Garrett a tray. "That's happened before. We've tossed food more than once." "Rick just told us not to log it." Garrett took the tray without replying. He didn't need to say anything. She already knew he wouldn't let it slide. By late afternoon, the store had begun to calm. Garrett called the team in for a short debrief. They gathered around the prep table, still in aprons and gloves, sweat on their brows but shoulders not as tense. "I'm not going to pretend we fixed everything today," Garrett said. "We didn't. We're short-staffed and we're dealing with the fallout of someone who abused his position." No one interrupted. "But here's what's happening next. Camille is staying here through the week. She's not management, she's oversight. She'll handle schedules, compliance, and interviews. We're bringing in 2 new hires by the weekend. You'll get to meet them before they start." Sienna crossed her arms. "What about long-term?" "I'm restructuring management at this location. We're not rushing to replace Rick. I want someone who earns your trust. Until then, I'll be checking in twice a week. In person, you'll see me here, not just read about me in a memo." Darius raised an eyebrow. "You really willing to do that for one store?" Garrett answered without hesitation. "Yes, because it's not just a store, it's people. And I let someone treat you like parts in a machine." Alyssa looked down at the floor, then back up. "Why now?" Garrett's gaze didn't waver. "Because I watched a 17-year-old collapse on my floor and I realized I didn't know what was happening in my own company. That's not leadership. That's negligence." Nobody clapped. Nobody needed to. They just stood there looking at him like maybe finally someone was paying attention. The fryer beeped in the background and Tomas turned back to it. "We still on the clock, for now," Garrett said. "But you're getting paid for every minute, including this one." They scattered back to their stations. Garrett stepped outside for the first time all day, the late sun washing the sidewalk in amber light. He pulled out his phone and called the legal department. "We've got a situation," he said. "I'll explain everything, but start looking into wage theft and possible civil liability. We're making this right even if it costs us," and he meant it. By the following Monday, Garrett had already approved emergency backfill shifts for 3 other stores to free up experienced team members for temporary duty at location 17. 2 assistant managers from different branches were rotated in for 5-day stretches, while Camille remained on site to oversee compliance and documentation. Garrett wasn't delegating from a boardroom, he was still putting on gloves, prepping vegetables, and learning what corners had been cut for so long they'd practically been policy. At 6:45 in the morning, he was in the back sorting inventory with Tomas, reviewing the walk-ins' temperature logs. They were reliable again after the cooling unit was replaced on Friday. Tomas handed him a clipboard wordlessly, then returned to stacking milk crates. "You ever work any other stores in the chain?" Garrett asked. "No," Tomas replied. "Rick never let anyone transfer in or out, said it messed with his system." Garrett nodded, flipping to the next page. "You'd be open to picking up more hours at another location if it meant consistent scheduling." Tomas looked up. "If it's fair pay and not chaos." "Yeah." Noted. Garrett had already begun designing a regional rotation program for cross-training and coverage. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would give the staff options and leverage. At 8, Ali walked in. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a loose red t-shirt. His mother had driven him, but she waited in the car. He looked better thin, pale still but upright, alert. Sienna noticed him first. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know," he said. "I'm not clocking in, just wanted to say something." Garrett stepped forward. "You feel up to this?" "I do." Ali pulled a folded piece of paper from his back pocket. "I wrote down what happened, not just that day, everything. From the first time I asked for a water cup and Rick told me to toughen up. I don't want to forget it just because I'm okay now." Garrett accepted the paper without opening it. "I'm going to read this. And we're adding it to the report we're building for legal." Ali hesitated, then asked, "Is he really not coming back?" "He's not." Ali looked down at his shoes, hands in his pockets. "Then I'll be back when I'm cleared. You'll have a spot. And it won't be under someone like him again." Ali gave a single nod and walked back out to the lot. Darius had overheard from the dish station. "Kid still wants to work here after all that." "Some people don't get to choose where they work," Garrett replied. "But they should still get to choose the conditions." Around 10, Camille called Garrett into the office. She had finished her one-on-ones with the crew and was now compiling the full compliance report. She turned her monitor toward him. "Payroll irregularities go back 15 months, she said. "Rick was shaving shifts in 10-minute increments. That adds up." Garrett leaned in. "We're covering it all retroactively, no settlements, no paperwork games, just pay them what they're owed." Camille nodded. "Already processing it." "Also," Garrett added, "every employee who was pushed out without pay reach out, tell them exactly why, and offer them priority interviews if they want back in." Camille paused. "Even the ones who left 6 months ago, especially them." She tapped a few notes on her keyboard. "That'll be a first for us." Outside the office, Alyssa had taken over the register while training a new hire named Naomi, one of the rehires Camille had tracked down. Naomi had worked at the location 9 months ago for 2 weeks before quitting without notice. Now it made sense why. She was quiet but focused, and Alyssa was patient, walking her through each transaction. Garrett watched from the kitchen entrance. The dynamic was already different. People weren't just doing their jobs. They were participating. After the lunch rush, Garrett stepped outside for air. The sky was overcast and the wind cut through his shirt. He leaned against the brick wall and took out his phone, dialing the number for the company's external ethics consultant. "This is Garrett Newton," he said. "I want to schedule a full culture audit for all 20 locations. Anonymous surveys, random interviews, unscheduled drop-ins. I don't care what it costs." The voice on the other end said they'd begin drafting the scope. Garrett hung up and walked back inside. By 3, the kitchen was prepping for the dinner rush. Garrett joined Naomi at the prep sink, slicing tomatoes. She worked quickly but glanced over occasionally, clearly unsure how to talk to him now that she knew who he was. "You were here before," he said. She nodded. "Didn't last long. I read your file, said voluntary resignation." "That's what they told me to write if I wanted my last check." Garrett paused. "You'll get the difference, plus hazard pay for that final week." Naomi looked at him, startled. "You don't have to do that." "I do, actually. It's the bare minimum." Naomi didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. As the dinner rush built, the team fell into a rhythm. Garrett stayed until closing, helping mop floors and count the drawer. He didn't need to. Camille was still managing, but he wasn't going to walk out early. Not this time. After the last customer left, Garrett sat with the crew in the dining area. everyone still in uniform, eating leftover fries and sipping sodas. Darius leaned back in his chair. "You sticking around tomorrow?" "Not here," Garrett said. "I'll be at a different store." "Seeing what else I've missed?" Alyssa asked. "You doing this at every location?" Garrett nodded. "Not always undercover, but yes." Sienna wiped her hands on a napkin. "You ever think about what would have happened if Philly hadn't dropped?" "I think about it every night," Garrett said. Nobody spoke after that. Garrett stood, tossed his cup, and looked around the room. "You've got a team now. One that reports to you as much as you report to them. If anything starts to slip again, whether it's with pay, treatment, or safety, you tell me directly." "No middlemen?" Naomi asked. "What if people don't believe you'll really listen?" "Then they haven't seen what happens when I finally do." The crew filed out slowly after cleanup. Garrett stayed behind with Camille to finish the closing reports. When the lights were off and the last door locked, he didn't go home. He drove to a nearby 24-hour diner and opened his laptop. He started drafting a message to every employee in the company, not a press release, not a policy memo, a letter from him explaining what he saw, what he failed to see, and what was going to change. He didn't try to make it sound polished. He didn't soften the truth. He just wrote it like someone who had packed bags next to a dehydrated teenager and finally understood what accountability looked like. By the time he hit send, the sun was starting to rise. He closed the laptop, paid his bill, and drove to the next store.